After Erick Fedde's poor outing on Tuesday in Denver, this situation is officially John Mozeliak's biggest error as Cardinals president of baseball operations. I'll explain what I mean by that and where the Cardinals go from here. Coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Wednesday morning, July 23rd, 2025. And last night, we witnessed the conclusion of the biggest error, the greatest mistake, the most significant miscalculation made in the entire tenure of John Mozeliak as the president of baseball operations of the St. Louis Cardinals. I do not believe I am being hyperbolic even a little bit when it comes to how badly John Mozeliak and this organization has bungled the past month of the Erick Fedde saga. And I apologize for not getting this podcast out a little earlier. I know the Cardinals have a day game today, but I was subbing in my family's bowling league for the summer last night. Had my first 300 in a no-tap, which was kind of fun. It's a no-tap, so it doesn't count as a real 300. But anyway, wanted to get this up as quick as I could this morning and talk about this situation as the Cardinals, they lose a game to the Rockies, which is bad enough. I said, if you don't sweep them, what are we doing here? What are we even talking about when it comes to the notion that this team can contend? And unfortunately, the loss comes because specifically of starting pitching, and because specifically the starting pitcher that took the ball for the Cardinals last night should not have still been on the roster. And it's not a recent development. And I hate that we're going to be bagging on Erick Fedde because it's not really his fault. It's John Mozeliak's fault. And if it's not specifically Mo's fault, put Bill DeWitt on the list as well. And I'll explain why I think ownership could be complicit in this as well. I don't know specifically who made the call as to how the Cardinals have handled Fedde. To continue running him out there today and the Saturday before the trade deadline and on the 6th of July against the Cubs at Wrigley when he couldn't get out of the second inning. At some of those points, there's data points throughout the entire saga. You find a moment to say enough. And they never did. Well, they'll find it now. Fedde won't start again for the Cardinals. If he does, I mean, we have completely jumped the shark. But there's just no way. There's just no way. You can make other choices. You can make other decisions. You're not subject to the status quo that isn't serving you as an organization, that isn't serving your fan base, that isn't serving the other players in that clubhouse. You're not victims in all of this. You get to dictate the terms. And for whatever reason, Mo has sat on his hands with this one. I understand that you wanted to get a skip for Liberatore because his workload is up there, for sure. I totally get that. But the schedule was not a surprise to anybody. There were weeks and weeks and arguably months leading up to Matthew Liberatore getting worked to the point that he has, where you could have gone out and made an addition. I know you weren't expecting to have to work very hard this year, Mo. I know that the terms and the expectations were set to basically let this be a coast it, ride it out kind of year where the Cardinals could win 78 games and everybody knew the deal and that would be fine because you told everybody at the beginning that, well, we're going to lower the payroll. We're going to have a little bit of a different look to this season. We're going to give runway. Totally get it. But when your players in that organization go out on the field and your manager and your coaching staff go out and put together a product that, despite the front office and ownership's best efforts, is in contention. And the reason I'm being harsh like that is because, again, when ownership says we're going to decrease the payroll and we're going to try to trade away from our big salaries, that's the effort that they're making. They're trying to put a lesser product on the field and pay less for it. At its core, that's what that is. And when Wilson Contreras and Sonny Gray say, no, I want to be a part of the thing you said it was going to be when you signed me, I'm cool. I'm going to chill. And Arenado says, well, if you're really doing this, if you're really tearing it down, here's my list of teams that I'll go to if you can orchestrate a trade. And then when Mozeliak, at the direction of ownership, makes the effort to do that and gets a deal together with Houston, Arenado says, all right, it's early in the offseason. I am actually going to say no for now, hoping that maybe if something comes together with one of the other teams on my list that are maybe a preference for me, we might be able to revisit that. Otherwise, I'll chill. I'll stick this out with the Cardinals because, I prefer that to just moving my family for something that's not the right thing. Okay, respect it. Fine. But the efforts were to tear it down in the offseason to a greater degree than what happened. All right, well, if we can't shed payroll, we're just not going to spend any money fixing the redundancies of the roster, fixing the depth issue. We're just going to roll it out there and see what happens. Fine. The expectations are lower because of that. We should be able to get away with not being particularly active during the season. But then what happened? The Cardinals had reached 8-9 games above 500. They never were able to quite climb over that hill and get above that point. But as other teams in the division began to surge throughout the month of July, the Cardinals cratered because they looked at what happened in May and June and said, we're kind of right there. Maybe we get away with this for 6 months and we're actually competitive, and maybe we sell a few extra tickets because of that. Don't have to do anything. Don't have to be proactive about this. We don't have to consider that, Miles Mikolas, Erick Fedde, those guys are performing better than their peripheral data suggests they should. We might need to consider having some depth options. We might need to go out there and be creative. Like this idea that we're harsh on John Mozeliak as the media when he just sits there and doesn't improve the team and doesn't try. Maybe he tried, but he can't execute. I don't know. But there were opportunities to see this iceberg ahead and to be proactive about it and say, you know what, we're 7-8 games above 500 we didn't expect to be, rather than just assume that Fedde's going to be this guy that he's normally not all year long, or that Mikolas is going to continue to be 2 runs on an ERA better than what he was last year, and that he's not ever going to backslide, and that Palante is going to be the same guy, and that none of these guys are going to get hurt, by the way, and that Liberatore is not going to, we know the number of innings. We know that there's going to be a point in time where we got to be careful with him. But we're just going to say, that's fine. I don't see an iceberg. What iceberg? And we're not going to make an effort earlier than when our ship, our organization makes contact with that iceberg. And then we go, we're taking on water. What are we going to do? Guess we got to start throwing stuff overboard. That's what it's going to look like. And I'm advocating now, if it's, deteriorated to a point where it's not worth saving, you might as well try to get some people into some lifeboats. Get Ryan Helsley into that lifeboat. Get Phil Maton into that lifeboat. And maybe, you get something back for it. It's not a perfect analogy, but you get the picture. They were not in a position to where it had to be this way, where you're 2 games above 500 and it feels like you're not in the race anymore. They were in the race. I could look at the dates of it, but it wasn't that long ago. But the decisions that were made weren't made with the idea that it matters to give our fan base something to be excited about. We just want to roll out what we've got and hope that they show back up to the ballpark, and kind of wonder indignantly why they aren't. Why aren't they worshiping at the feet of the Cardinal way? Why aren't the fans buying into this? Don't be confused that attendance is down. Maybe that's not giving them enough credit. Maybe they know and knew attendance would be down, and they just had to accept it for what it was because that was the plan for this year. They're not confused as to why that's happening. Privately, they understand it. But, man, privately, did they understand that this way of handling Erick Fedde over the past month was a joke? Did they understand how ridiculous this looked to the public eye? To be telling the beat reporters and having it out there that, well, we're looking to shop Erick Fedde. Again, this isn't me criticizing the beat reporters. They're sharing the information that they get from league sources. And the Cardinals allowed this idea that they're shopping Erick Fedde. What is the point of shopping Erick Fedde? Okay, no, let's actually address that. I've talked about it previously, but now that he's given up, and by the way, 8-4, the score last night, if you missed it, I jumped right into just talking about the big picture stuff. 6 runs he gave up in 3 innings against the Rockies. I get it. You're pitching at Coors Field. It's not easy. But the guy gave up 6 runs, 2 homers. And I feel like set a tone by allowing runs in each of the first 3 innings. 1 run, 2 runs, 3 runs. Set a tone that the Cardinal offense responded to. Because Bradley Blaylock came in with a 9.97 earned run average and is not a lefty. He's a righty. There's every reason in the world for the Cardinals to beat up this guy. And I feel like once they didn't quite do enough early against him and Fedde happened, it's over, man. And they still put up runs. They scored 4 runs. If you have another starting pitcher or a bullpen game last night, you probably win that game. The Cardinals have thrown away games in the midst of what was supposed to be a chase for a playoff spot on this Erick Fedde experiment. And here's the biggest problem I have with it. What was the guiding principle behind this decision-making process? It was to try and shop Erick Fedde to get his trade value up compared to where it had been when he gave up a touchdown, another touchdown, couldn't get out of the second inning against the Cubs. They came to the conclusion at that point. Remember, that was the point at which we had a whole week where it was like, yeah, I don't know. We'll see who Saturday's starter is going to be. And it was like Ollie Marmol saying, yeah, it's not really working what he's doing. Hello? Is anybody home up there? I'm trying to be subtle, but I can't tell if you hear me upstairs. Anybody home? Is anybody home? I'm doing everything short of pleading with you to get Erick Fedde off my baseball team because we can't win with the current version of him. And if you look at the standings, you might notice we're not far off. Hello, Mo, are you there? I mean, it was iceberg ahead. Ollie Marmol was a professional about it, but if you read the quotes from him that week, yeah, we're going to have conversations. He kept saying, there's more than one person in the room when it comes to making this decision. We're going to continue to talk about it as a staff. That's code. That's code for I don't set the roster. Remember, I tweeted about it that week. There's someone else employed by the St. Louis Cardinals to set the active roster other than Oliver Marmol. That person is John Mozeliak, and you can't escape it because it's his last year. No, if it's very clear, and every beat writer, Katie Wu, John Mozeliak is who is in charge of the trade deadline for the Cardinals. It's not Chaim Bloom. There's no confusion in the moment as to who is the decision maker. It's Mo. Is that to protect Chaim Bloom from the fact that ownership wants this year's team to make some decisions that are in the goal of cost saving as the very first principle rather than moving the team forward and trying to win? I don't know, because that doesn't even make sense to me. Like, if you recognize that you're close in the playoff chase, the chance to maybe get in and earn some additional revenue from making the playoffs, wouldn't that be worthwhile? But it feels like for the month of July, what they have done is they have allowed this notion of, well, we're going to rebuild Erick Fedde's trade value if we can because we'd like to get something for him, to dominate the discourse and the direction of the franchise. He only pitches every 5th day, so he can only impact 20% of the games. But it's like a cloud hanging over the organization when you are trying to scrap, claw, and fight for playoff positioning to wake up the front office above and get them to maybe make some moves that help you rather than hinder you or detract from your chances, like trading Helsley and Maton will do. And that's what they should do at this point, because they couldn't even sweep the Rockies because they kept running Erick Fedde out there. But that's neither here nor there. Like, as they're trying in the clubhouse and in that dugout to get it to a point where the record shows they should be making a push, as that's happening, the front office is continuing to run out Erick Fedde when it's clear at a certain point that it just stopped. The cutter ain't cutting anymore, guys. Whatever the reason for that is. If it's physical, if it's the baseballs, if it's whatever it is, if it's he's just going through a slump, but maybe he's just kind of coming back down to earth to the kind of pitcher that he normally has been. Again, this has been more drastic than anything. You could say, well, Erick Fedde's just been a guy for his whole career. The fact that he was performing so well showed that the regression was coming. Not like this. Not like touchdown, can't get out of the second inning, can't get through the fifth inning, touchdown, but no extra point. I mean, that's been Erick Fedde's last month. Whatever the reason is, the Cardinals get paid more. They internally get paid more than I get paid to know the reason, to discern it and identify it, and then determine whether or not they can expect it to continue or to correct itself. And there's been nothing during this stretch that a quote, a smoking gun, oh, hey, we figured out he's tipping, it's this. Nothing like that to suggest it was about to turn around. It was literally just, I don't know, let's kind of wait it out, bide our time, and maybe somebody else will need him. And then what's the goal in that again? The goal, in my opinion, more than this idea that the Cardinals were suddenly going to get a prospect back for Fedde. Everybody's been talking about, well, in 2023, they held on to Paul DeJong when he was really struggling. The Blue Jays ended up having an injury to their shortstop position. They needed an infielder, and they traded for Paul DeJong, and they gave the Cardinals Matt Swanson, who was a prospect who was not really a prospect, and he was too old for the level that he was pitching at, and he was just a reliever even at the time. But it meant the Cardinals, got rid of some of the DeJong money that was owed to him, which wasn't a lot, and they got a piece for him, a lottery ticket. And then now that Matt Swanson 2 years later has contributed to the Cardinals and any chance he's gotten, he's looked pretty good this year. He'll be back. He'll be back in the mix as time goes along. Now that that's happened, everybody's like, hey, maybe the Cardinals are trying to get the next Matt Swanson out of Erick Fedde. And I would say, yeah, maybe that's true. Realistically, here's why that argument doesn't hold water for me, comparing it to the DeJong trade in 2023. And why it was worthwhile to hang on to DeJong rather than just DFA him. And if nobody claimed him on waivers, you're paying the money and that's done. You release him. Here's why it doesn't hold water. When the Cardinals traded Paul DeJong, they were 47-60. They were 13 games below 500 at that deadline. This Cardinals team was 8 or 9 games above 500 within the last few weeks. I could look at the exact record, but it's been a recent slide for the Cardinals that they have fallen basically completely out of the race. All right, so don't compare the Cardinals holding on to an asset till the bitter end in hopes that they could get something for him in 2023 when they were out of it. There was nothing to lose at that point. It was already done because of how poorly they'd started that season. The Cardinals on July the 1st were 7 games over 500. As recently as the 8th of July, they were 6 games over 500. Excuse me, the 10th of July, they were 6 games over. As recently as the 13th of July, the day before the All-Star break, they boosted back up to 5 games over 500. They were in the mix even at that point. They've since been swept by the Arizona Diamondbacks, and they have dropped a game to the Rockies, who have won 25 games all year. They're on pace to win 40, and it would have been less than that, except for they beat you last night, 8-4. So it's not comparable, and it's not a reasonable moment in Cardinals history to cite to say, well, it's like that. It's like that. It makes sense. They did it then. They can do it now. I understand why they're trying to get something for Fedde. No, you don't let this team isn't 13 games under 500. You don't let the idea that one of the worst performing pitchers in Major League Baseball this season has any notion of trade value attached to his name, or that teams, the other 29 teams, are stupid enough to think that if Erick Fedde has one good outing that suddenly his trade value is back and you can get something for him. No. What it is the Cardinals waiting it out. If other pitchers in the league get hurt and a team gets super desperate, they might want to take on Erick Fedde when you dump him, because the deadline to dump him is the trade deadline. They're not going to keep him beyond that. They're just not. And so through this process, you're thinking, if a team has another injury and they get desperate, maybe they will trade for Erick Fedde, or when we DFA him, they will claim him on waivers. And what would that mean? Well, you're saving money. You're saving the cost associated with Erick Fedde's remaining contract for August and September, which is not a huge number, a couple million probably. But I feel like the Cardinals, and somebody can tell me I'm wrong. Somebody should tell me I'm wrong and tell me why I've got this wrong. But it feels to me like the Cardinals continued to roll Erick Fedde out there with the idea that if it went even halfway decent, they might be able to get out from a couple $1 million of his salary and maybe get a flyer prospect for him. And the reason you do that is A, the money of it all, but B, the idea that we are clinging to the sunk cost fallacy in the notion that, well, Tommy Edman won the NLCS MVP last year, and if we don't get something for Erick Fedde, that's going to look like it was a bad trade. I actually think that's part of what's driving the Cardinals. And some Cardinals fans say, hey, that drives me too. I want them to get something for Fedde because, well, they gave up Edman to get him. Let me tell you this. If that's how you're running the organization, you do not belong in this industry, period. The sunk cost fallacy is what is at play here. Give you the dictionary definition of it. The sunk cost fallacy is the tendency to continue with a decision even when it's no longer the best course of action because of the resources already invested in it. Well, we've already invested Tommy Edman into this decision. Now that Erick Fedde's not panning out, we've got to keep trying with Erick Fedde because if we don't and it goes badly, even though it's already going badly, if it ends badly, then people will look back on that trade and say it was a bad one. We've got to stick this out. Or we've got to try to get something for Fedde so we can look back and say, see, it was worth it to trade Edman. I don't know how much that's driving the organization. I hope zero. I hope it's none because it's stupid if it is. The sunk cost fallacy. You don't continue with a decision once you see that it's not the right course of action just because you paid Tommy Edman to get that done. And look, it wasn't, I can still sit here and say it wasn't even a terrible trade. Y'all know what Tommy Edman's numbers are this year. I love Tommy Edman. I think he's a winning player, but he's got a 680 OPS. Like, he's not having a great season. He's 13% below league average or whatever it is. Cardinals have a bunch of guys with higher OPSs than him, including Nolan Gorman. Granted, he's on the IL right now, but Lars Nootbaar, Nolan Gorman, all these guys have better offensive numbers than Edman this year. It's okay. You make a trade, it works out, it doesn't work out. You have to know when to cut ties. And I feel like the Cardinals have allowed this notion of Erick Fedde for some reason. And again, he's not a bad guy. I hate that you know the vehicle here is to rip on him when really it's more about the organization that has put him in a position to allow this to continue. But that his trade value should be something to be monitored and prioritized rather than, holy smokes, we're 6 games above 500 and didn't expect to be. That's the thing. Like, you could say, well, who was going to start for Liberatore if Fedde wasn't still here? If McGreevy was in Fedde's spot? Are you going to run Liberatore out there and blow his arm out? No. You have weeks and weeks and weeks of season to plan ahead for that. You don't get to just act like when they put Liberatore on the rest regimen and that he's going to skip a start, that was the first time it ever came up in anybody's mind that he might need something like that. You go out and you get another arm. It happens all the time. You don't have to wait until the last week of July to make a move. Dozens of moves get made every year. You can be a team that makes them. You can make them from a position of strength rather than once it's already too late and now you say, well, we've got to sell. They do have to sell, but it's because of how they bungled this month. And Cardinals fans have a right to be frustrated by it. I think it's the worst, whatever you call it. Is it miscalculation? Is it the worst piece of incompetence? Is it the worst cowardice? Is it the worst just moment of John Mozeliak's tenure as the Cardinals GM or Pobo? I think it is. Because it didn't have to be this way. And again, if it's ownership driving it and Mo's hands are tied, and that's something I'll never get the information of, right? Well, then shame on ownership if that's what it is. But somebody should be ashamed. Because the players in that clubhouse did not deserve this. They're working their asses off. And Erick Fedde's working his ass off too. But you know what? He just doesn't have it at this point. And so you make a business decision before it's too late and before it helps crater the team and team morale. I cannot imagine team morale is very high on this road trip right now. I mean, it wasn't just Fedde that had a bad week. Michaelis got beat around. Sonny got hit around. Palante. I mean, everybody's struggling right now. Except for McGreevy. So, yeah, you probably send him back to Memphis. No, he won't go back down. He won't. Period. Can't. There's just no way. But it's too late now. I mean, they're 2 games above 500. Maybe they sweep the Padres this weekend. But it just feels like a team that It had a fire behind it. It had some momentum, and now that momentum is gone. And it wasn't just this one decision that led to it, but it contributed in a major way to the general vibe of what's going on with the Cardinals in the month of July. It did not have to be this way. And they really took it to heart, that notion of it's a retool season, it's a runway season, except for the runway was going to, a 35-year-old pitcher who's just, he didn't have it anymore. It's a miscalculation of what Fedde's value is to the league at best, and at worst, it's a cowardly moment in Cardinals history. This team wasn't probably going to win the World Series anyway, but man, it deserved a chance to put its best foot forward for the month of July and see where the chips fell. Because if the chips would have had them 5 games over 500 right now, 6 games, whatever it would have been, like if they win last night, instead of being 2 up, they're 4 up. You add 1 additional win and take a loss away, that would be, 6 games above 500. It is not, and I don't believe it would be very hard to go back through the last 3 weeks or so and find 2 more wins for this team if you put out a competent starting pitcher. Do they have depth in the minors? No. But that doesn't absolve you. Just because you came into the year with one thing, no depth, or thinking that the young guys would be the depth, but then all of them in AAA have injuries that they're dealing with, so they can't come up and help you. You work. You go to work and you get additional pieces as you watch the roster at the big league level thrive and exceed expectations and stay in the race. You augment that team, and you do it before it's too late. John Mozeliak thinks the media is too hard on him. A lot of times, I think he's wrong. Sometimes, stuff he gets blamed for probably should be attributed to something else, but the public information is just not out there. In this case, man, it's not harsh to say that this was just an unbelievable bungling, because we went through multiple points in this saga where it was clear what needed to happen, and they continued not to do it, and they continued to hide behind, trade value. I mean, we're trying to up his trade value, as though we figured it out. We've put our top minds on the case and figured out that maybe we could trade this guy, and that's what we should allow to drive our decision-making. It's frustrating. It is frustrating to see that in a year where it didn't have to be this way, in my opinion. Rather than reward the roster for exceeding expectations, they just kind of sat around and waited for it to blow up. And it has. So, I'm never one that's going to say it's done, it's over, because those guys might turn things around this week. Anything can happen. It's baseball. They could beat up on the Padres and suddenly you go, well, that's the team you're chasing. You're not out of it yet. But because of the way the last couple of weeks have transpired, I think it would be a mistake not to gauge the markets for Helsley and Maton and trade those guys, and then bring up Swanson, Fernandez, Roycroft, if Granillo gets healthy. Bring up some of those guys, see what they are, so that you have a better idea for 2026 when you get to February of what your bullpen should look like. And if Riley O'Brien steps up and is your closer, or Graceffo steps up and is your closer, JoJo steps into a more prominent role and gets it done, maybe you keep winning games and you stay on the periphery of the race. But I think they're to the point where you've given up too many games now. You've given away too many games to expect it. Too many games to expect that by holding Helsley and Maton, it's worthwhile because you're still in the race. You're kind of on the outskirts now. And it would take a big week or two to climb back in. And I just don't think that counting on that. I've always used the phrase that, hey, you've already used up your 17-game winning streak for this century. That happened a few years ago. It's all done. You're not going to get another one. There's not another one coming. I just don't think it's good business to hold on to these guys when you have, through your mismanagement of this situation, played yourselves out of the race. So, if that's too harsh, that's too mean, that's not my intent. I analyze St. Louis Cardinals baseball for a living, and my analysis is that the front office let down the players and the coaching staff on this one. That's what I got for you. Let me know in the comments if I hit the mark, if I missed the mark, and how you feel about the current state of the Cardinals. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. We will talk to you next time on b-schaeff Daily. Peace.